Hello and welcome to the Skippy Show, episode 3. First thing that you will probably notice is that you can see the beautiful logo of the Skippy Show podcast and you can't see my face. So why? That's a really good question to start with. Firstly, it's partly because podcasts traditionally don't have video attached. That would be more of a stream, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is I've spent a fair bit of time on the graphics for this episode, and I've also, in doing that, not had any time to make myself look presentable in the slightest. So you'll just be hearing my voice, hopefully nice and crisp and clear over said graphics, and that will ensure that you're not put off by, just in a word, grease levels. It's Saturday afternoon. It is about 5:30. I'm getting ready to watch the Manchester United Crystal Palace game, which is on mute. I am chilling in the kitchen. I mean, who even knows if I'm fully clothed at this point? You certainly don't, listening in, do you? It's a Saturday. Nobody can judge me for that. But why not get straight into it with the kits? Mainly from, entirely from Europe, but mainly from those top 5 leagues. Looking at the sides that kind of missed out on episode 2, really. If you haven't seen episode 2, then do go and check it out now. Purely across European leagues. Some greats, some not so greats, tops and flops as ever to look at. And we will be starting our journey this time in Italy, and we will be starting with Inter Milan. Here we are. Yes, the Inter Milan home and away shirts for the upcoming season, modelled beautifully by Christian Eriksen. Of course, if you're watching the Tottenham documentary, then you will know all about his departure from Spurs to Inter Milan, modelling their home in the traditional colours of blue and black, and their away in... Well, let's get on to the away, but we'll start with the home. I'm not a massive fan of what I can only describe as unnecessary zigzags. I think that the traditional straight lines are fine, similar but different colours to the AC Milan kit. You know, it's a traditional kit. I appreciate that there's not a huge amount that you can do with the kits, and they've tried to funk it up with the zigzag. I'm just not entirely sure that it works. But I suppose I don't love it. I don't hate it. One thing I've always liked, or certainly in recent years liked about the Inter Milan kits is I think that Pirelli is quite a cool shirt sponsor, and it does just work on that home kit as well. So the home kit for me doesn't score particularly highly, but it's not too bad. The away, unfortunately, is a totally different scenario. Oh my goodness. You can only assume that someone has actually signed off on this being their kit, but that person should get fired immediately. This is Hall of Shame material. This one might actually be worth purchasing because it could become, famous or infamous for being straight up one of the worst kits of all time. It's up there with Wolves for me, but for totally different reasons. I mean, the Wolves kit, at least one thing you can say for it is that they've tried to do something different, and in my opinion, it just hasn't worked, but some people will love it. I can't see how anyone can even think about liking this kit. I won't be the first to say this, and I won't be the last. It looks like something you would play noughts and crosses on. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's what they tried to do with the badge and the Nike tick there. They're trying to start off a game of their own kind of Italian version of noughts and crosses. It doesn't look good. It doesn't work. You can see it more clearly on the right-hand side, but also on the left with Christian Eriksen there as well. I mean, he's one of the cooler looking players in the Serie A, but I mean, it depends. When's his next hair job coming on? He must have had at least 5 different, what's it called? Hairline, where they take the hair from your bum and stick it on your forehead. And it just doesn't take for the poor Dane. He looks cool with the receding hairline. I don't think that there's anything particularly wrong with it, but I'm sure at some point he will have a beautiful straight line across his forehead this season as well. But even he doesn't look good in that kit. Nothing about that kit is nice. They've blocked out space for Pirelli, which I can understand, but again looks tacky. it's not worked at all, has it? But please let me know what you feel about this kit. I'd be stunned if anyone likes it. But I am going to also suggest maybe buying it as a Hall of Shamer that might be worth something one day. It depends how they do. If they cause shocks and maybe push for the league, then Inter Milan and that horrendous away kit could one day become famous. And in 20 years' time, they'll be doing similar kits and calling it a retro throwback. But that's Inter Milan, so not overall impressed with their kits. Home kit, standard but quite poor. But the away kit, a true shocker, absolutely one of the worst in Europe. I doubt that anyone can come up with an argument to say why that is a nice away shirt for them. So we'll quickly move on to sides. Again, they're not gorgeous, but AC Roma, or AS Roma, my apologies, with their home and away kits on the screen now. We'll start with the home. There's not a lot you can do if you're Roma, and I don't hate what they've done. They've got a very limited colour scheme that they can go for, with the kind of ready burgundy and the slightly lighter orange, and they've gone for it. It's it's another Airways shirt, isn't it? So you've got Emirates and Qatar Airways, and between them they cover a lot of the top teams, as we will show throughout this episode. But it's quite a nice kit. I'm not going to complain about it. Quite simply, the home kit. It's nothing to write home about, but I'm not going to complain about it either. They can't do a lot, but they've tried, and it looks okay. It doesn't look amazing, but the colour scheme's normal, and I don't know what you can necessarily expect. And the away shirts is quite smart. One thing that you will definitely notice about the Roma away shirt for this season is the change in badge. Now, what they've done is they've kind of thrown it back in a way to just the wolf's head. It actually looks, in my opinion, like something out of Game of Thrones, this badge. But they've moved away from the traditional wolf, feeding the two younger, which is Remus and Romulus. Is that who that's supposed to emanate? But they've just gone for the traditional mother wolf head on their away shirt this season. They've gone for a collar, which again links to the previous colour scheme, and it looks reasonably smart in my opinion. My only thing on the Roma away shirt this season is I'd say it looks more like a Fred Perry number than a football shirt. Kind of standard polar neck that you'd see at a barbecue. One of the dads will be whipping out that Roma shirt before we know it, but it's, like I say, it's okay. I quite like the throwback badge on this one. You see some that are quite poor. I like that they haven't just gone for a blackout and changed the standard badge to black, because that's what everyone does. But overall quite smart, but looks like something that you would pick up for a tenner in Sports Direct, and the fact that they're probably charging about €80 for that's a bit of a steal. But a lot of people out there have probably got polo shirts that look quite similar to that, to be honest. So all you'd need to do is get a talented seamstress to make a few tweaks here and there, and I'm sure you'd end up with your own version of a replica shirt. But so not too impressed. Obviously, in episode 2, we focused on AC Milan, and I quite like their kits for this season. But Inter and Roma so far letting down the side in the Serie A. So let's quickly move on to a side that often brings out belters of shirts, and that is Venezia. Now, not a huge fan of their home strip for this season. It looks more like a lollipop than a shirt. What they've done is they've quite simply inversed their colours from last season. So last season their away shirt was black and the home shirt was white, with the same orange and green colour scheme. Obviously, if you're colourblind, then you will have no idea which one is which. Particularly if you're a Gazelle, which is orange-green colourblind, but I doubt that I'll have many Gazelle subscribers. If you are a Gazelle subscriber, then of course shout out to you. They've inversed the colour schemes, and they're quite smart. I prefer the away shirt this season. I think it's a bit cooler, but it doesn't do as well, I don't think, as last season's Venezia kits. Like I say, the home shirt, I'm not a huge fan of the horizontal stripes and what does make it look more like a lollipop than anything else. But the away shirt is another gorgeous one, really, for Venezia, and something cool that they do. I've always found this cool. During the season, if you go into one of the official club stores, which are dotted out in the weirdest places, as you kind of expect in Venice. It is one of the weirdest places in the world, an amazing place, but a weird place at that. Oh, Palace have just gone one up against United as I'm midway through this. Good goal from Townsend as well. And if you listened into the FPL Selections podcast, which came out yesterday, you'll be knowing that I told you to steer clear of De Gea, and how right I was to do that, because they are 1-0 down already to Palace. Who knows how this one will turn out, but nothing De Gea could particularly do about it. But a poor goal to concede nonetheless. And if you didn't catch up on the FPL podcast, it's a little bit late now, but they will be out every week. So before each game week, worth listening in, and another reason to subscribe. Anyway, back to Venezia. If you go to Venice, if you're lucky enough to go to Venice, obviously post-COVID, and assuming that it doesn't flood again anytime soon, then if you go into an official club store, you can be lucky enough to pick up one of these shirts. It is quite expensive, but what you can sometimes get out of that, unless the game is sold out, is 2 tickets to the next home game. And if times align, unfortunately, when I was out there and bought my away shirt last season, I wasn't staying for the weekend, so I wasn't available for the match. But hopefully next time I go, because I do love it as a city. It's an incredibly passionate place. I will be fortunate enough to go and watch a Venezia game, because I just think that would be awesome, and I think it's a really cool thing that they do for their tourists, and of course probably encourages shirt sales as well, so a genius bit of PR for them. So those are the shirts that we are covering from the Serie A. Not too impressive in my opinion. In fact, let me just go back and check. All of these three, in fact, I've just checked. All of these three are made by Nike, and I think there's a number of Nike kits this season that are very nice to look at, but I think that Puma are probably some of the nicest kits that I've come across this season in terms of a make, and of course Adidas and Hummel always come out with a few as well. But no, I think these three Serie A Nike shirts have been a bit of a letdown, although I do like the Venezia away. Shall we move to another country in Europe? I'll take a sip of my water whilst you compose yourself as we look to move up to France. Covered Paris Saint-Germain in episode 2, and in episode 3 we will be covering Olympique Lyon and Olympique Marseille. So there you are, Lyon, and these are the graphics that I was talking about. I loved spending time on these this morning. I quite like Lyon. I quite like Depay. Hopefully he stays there. He does really well there and creates some passion for them. And I quite like the fact that there's teams that can challenge Paris Saint-Germain. I think that, PSG have had a terrible start to the season, haven't they? But I still think that they will... sides like Lyon and Marseille, it's good to have strong sides that will challenge them. It makes the league a little bit more interesting. And Lyon's kits this season, basic, but do the job. Let's start with the home kit. They don't try and overdo it. It's classic Adidas, so it's got the 3 stripes. And there's nothing more that you'd necessarily expect from it. Plain white, it's got different coloured sleeves, obviously for the different colours of the logo, the different colours of the France flag. And it looks smart, it looks fresh. It's back to another airline sponsor with Emirates, of course. But no, I like it. It looks fresh. It's good, and the away kit is similar. It's not total blackout. They've not gone blackout on the badge, which is different to most teams, and therefore I quite like it. The only downside, in my view, is the collar. Again, they've gone for the slightly odd collar. Now, I don't own any shirts with this kind of collar. So maybe I'll have to before I can properly judge it. I don't know. But I just feel like it looks weird. I feel like you've got to be a professional sports player to kind of pull it off, But we'll wait and see. I like the away kit. It's nothing in my view to write home about, but they're smart kits, aren't they? Adidas have done well. Whoever signed off on the kits, they did a better job than Inter Milan. And they look smart. They look fresh. Moving over to Marseille, again, relatively simple. I'm not convinced on Uber Eats as a shirt sponsor personally, but when you've got Dimitri Payet looking saucy out there, isn't he, Dimmy? As a West Ham fan, I just love Dimitri Payet. I'm gutted with everything that happened, but when you look at the fact that Marseille are now in the Champions League and where West Ham are, you can understand why he did unfortunately end up leaving. And their kits are quite nice. Home's quite plain. The colours a bit weird, but it's traditional Marseille colours of the white and the blue. And the away shirt a little bit out there, a little bit of a funky design. This is another one of those Puma kits that I was mentioning, but overall I quite like it. Because the colour scheme is in line with what you'd expect from Marseille, they don't chuck a pink or an orange in there. There's nothing too fancy for the club's away shirt for this season. And I think they've done a very good job. I'd say you see the keeper kit there as well in the red, looking fresh. Again, sometimes it is just simplicity with kits that makes them nice. I prefer a very slight V to the collar. I'm not convinced. I think that round neck could strangle you if you weren't careful. But overall, yeah, so my downsides to this would purely be slightly on the collar, slightly on the Uber Eats. I don't think that it screams class in quite the same way. I mean, does an airline, as I sort of reflect on it, does an airline, but I don't know, Uber Eats is not the coolest in my view. Nonetheless, those are some of the French shirts sides. I think they're all good. You know, you look at Serie A, and other than AC Milan, you've got some poor ones in Juventus and Inter, and Roma's only okay. And then you move across to France, and obviously PSG, as you'd expect, their kits are stunning. They've got a million different kits, but they're all quite fresh, and they are a bit of a fashion club, aren't they? But oh my goodness, De Gea's just made a horrendous. Oh no, he's cleared it. So I'm distracted by the game somewhat. Yeah, De Gea for your fancy team, definitely don't have him in there. I think it'll only take a few poor performances before we see Henderson in the Manchester United goal. So that is Marseille, and that concludes the French section. So why not move on to Spain? And just the one Spanish team that we'll be looking at, and it is Atletico Madrid. It's another Nike shirt, and as you can see, you can already tell that from the kind of shattered glass setup that they've literally carbon copied for every single team, which in a way I quite like because it's quite cool, but you know, it's not that original either. I mean, what do you expect from a home shirt from Atletico Madrid? It's standard, it's basic, you've got some decent players there, the collar's okay. It's fine, it's quite a cool kit. Is it a classic? No, because every Atletico home shirt is a classic because they all look the same and they're all, you know, standard Atletico. But it becomes a classic if they win something, you know, like when they won La Liga. That then becomes a classic shirt, but it looks exactly the same as this one. And this is where you get into the debate of, do they actually need a new shirt every season if it's just exactly the same? You know, if you're a side like Atletico, Barcelona, Real Madrid to a certain extent, you know, even going into other countries, AC and Inter, you know, Inter have tried to be slightly different this time, I appreciate, but away shirts and third shirts maybe, but do you need to change up the home kit? Questionable. For another 90 euros or whatever it is, I think perhaps not. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Moving on to the away shirt for Atletico Madrid though, and this one is only okay in my view. I see what they've tried to do. They've not gone for a blackout, they've gone for a blue out with both their badge and the shirt, but I'm not massively convinced by it. I don't think that the badge looks great. I think that the rest of the kit's fine. It's simple and it's effective, but the only slight twist is I'd like to just see their normal badge, the club's actual badge on the shirt. I think would look better. I think it would look cooler and it would make the kit look fresh. Overall, nothing bad to say about the Atletico shirt. It looks like it fits well. And if they have a good season, Atletico, then I think that these kits, you know, again, like I've said, could be one for collectors. But that's all for Spain, and I think that if you had to look at Atletico, Barca and Real, you'd probably put the Atletico home shirt as maybe the best, the Barcelona away shirt as the best, and the worst. Well, it's no longer that Real Madrid away. It has to be, without a shadow of a doubt, that Barcelona third, because I've looked at it in game now that they've played a game, and it's one of the worst kits I've ever seen. that Barcelona third kit, that pink. It features in episode 2, so do go back and watch if you haven't seen the shirt. That concludes the Spanish section. The Spanish section. That is such a difficult sentence to say. So let's move on. Let's not pause. Let's go to Borussia Dortmund of the Bundesliga of Germany. They are the only German side to feature in this episode of the Skippy Show. And they only do okay, really. It's a Puma masterclass, of course, but the away shirt's where I have more problems. The home shirt's okay, but it's a bit like, are you Hull City Tigers? And the answer I know is no. So why have they gone for this kind of tiger scheme? I'm not overly convinced by it. I think they get away with it, and I've seen them play in it, and it looks okay because all their players are quite cool. You know, Royce comes off the bench, tatted to oblivion, and just looks fresh, and it looks cool. But overall, yeah, it's funky, it's different. And if you're Dortmund, I get it, because you want to go for some different kits. It's not their worst that they've ever had. And I suppose it's quite animalistic in a way, so I shouldn't criticise it too much. And it's simple and it's effective. Their home shirt, that is. The away shirt, I've got a few problems with. Firstly, you know me, you know I don't like a sash. And that yellow sash, I think, looks quite poor. But the only way to make it worse is to put in some weird starry-eyed design underneath, which is exactly what they've done. And I won't lie, I don't like it. I don't like that bottom half. I think if you went for the sash, that makes it quite a poor kit. They've gone for the sash and the weird design underneath, as you can see there, modelled by Marco Royce, and I just don't think it looks good. Don't get me wrong, I think that Dortmund are one of the most passionate teams out there. I've got no doubts about that at all. I think that they're a great side. It'll be interesting to see if Sancho goes, but overall, that away shirt's not great, and the home shirt's questionable. It's a question of preference, really. A couple of things they could have done to tweak it maybe would make the 1 and 8 logo on the front, make the font in yellow so that it's just strictly a yellow and black, perhaps. But I think the home shirt comes down to personal preference. But on the away shirt, I'm going to put my foot down and say that I don't really like it. Okay, well, that's all the shirts. That is all the shirts. We have whistled through that. Just a few shirts here and there from across Europe. Episode 4, we'll be looking at the rest of the world. We will go from Inter Miami to Wellington Phoenix, covering the entire globe of new shirts from around the world, not including the Premier League and not including Europe, to look at again, some of the tops and flops from this season. And then after that, we can get into some heated debates on classics. And I will have some guests along with me to debate what shirts are hates and greats. It will be a hate-great debate. So I'm sure that you're looking forward to that in episodes 5 onwards. What I've done now is I've kind of spent some time moving on to the questions, but turn them into topics more than anything. So there's a couple of questions came in on fantasy football, which I'll be answering in the next fantasy football podcast. And then there was a couple of questions on managers as well, here and there. And one that stood out for me was, who's a worse manager, Michael Appleton or Avram Grant? That came in from a Portsmouth fan. Of course, both Appleton and Grant have managed Portsmouth, and neither of them did a particularly good job. In answer to that question, I'd say that Avram Grant is the worst manager because of his record in the following season at West Ham, and even previous to that, it was a very poor appointment at Chelsea. Fortunately, they had Terry and Lampard at the time basically managing the team for them, so Grant didn't have to do anything. But it brings up the wider topic around what managers are out there that are just really poor managers that still somehow get a job. I suppose it follows on from the Marco Silva discussion of, was he ever really that good a manager? I'm watching the United game now, and you have to bring in the question around Solskjaer. This season could be make or break for him, especially if they bring in Sancho, especially if they spend 100 million on him. They've brought in Van der Beek, but they've not had a great transfer window, I wouldn't say. I don't think that they've done a huge amount. They're obviously losing at the moment to Crystal Palace, which I won't lie, wasn't a huge shock for me. I feel like Palace started the season really well against Southampton, and I imagine they will race to 40 points, and then they'll start to do poorly again, as they seem to do almost every season. Hodgson just takes his foot off the pedal, doesn't he? But, the wider question around managers, and, we've got to go to Sunderland, really, I think, for just a series of poor managers. Di Canio had a couple of roles, firstly at Swindon, and then got the call-up for Sunderland, and did really poor. I think he had one good result in the Tyne Weir derby against Newcastle. I think they won that game 3-0, and he basically lived off that for the rest of the season. But he's just a poor manager. But Sunderland had a few, didn't they, in probably quite a short space of time. Gus Poyet, obviously Di Canio, and then Dick Advocat as well, who weirdly, he's one of these managers that has landed on his feet. He's now Feyenoord manager. You say Feyenoord are quite a big club, obviously second probably only to, second, third maybe to Ajax and PSV, depending on if you think they're a bigger club than PSV Eindhoven in the Eredivisie. But what an appointment for him that is, to get that gig. It's probably quite a chilled role as well. There's not too much expectation. There's not too many teams that are going to compete with you for top four either. And, you've always got a shot at European football. But, I mean, at Sunderland, he was useless. He was absolutely useless. And, they had Gus Poyet, Di Canio, Advocat. And it's no wonder, really, that they ended up, of course, going down. And then they had Moyes, of course, and he splits opinion, doesn't he, David Moyes? He's obviously done a decent job at West Ham, apparently in keeping them up twice. You'd say for the size of the club, fans like myself would expect a lot more from West Ham. But given the state of the club, he's done a good job keeping them up twice. But overall, there's some of these managers that, I mean, Mark Hughes was another one. Year after year after year, he'd get jobs and he'd stay in jobs that he really didn't deserve, in my opinion. I think that there's a lot of managers in the Premier League that are underrated, an awful lot that are overrated. Or, you can't say that Allardyce is overrated because the guy comes in to do a job to avoid relegation, and more often than not, in fact, I think every single time, he's managed to do that, and he doesn't overstay his welcome. Clubs then get rid of him, but he's done it countless times, and he's an example of a good manager to bring in to do that. But there's other managers. I mean, Alan Pardew in recent years is so poor, and I think we're now moving towards an era of new and different managers, which is good and which is exciting, because there was just a wagon wheel for a while, wasn't there, of the same managers going to the same clubs every single time. It would be, he leaves there, then he goes to another club who have sacked their manager, and they all just move one step further along on the kind of Allardyce Pulis wheel, really. And I think you've got to chuck Pardew in as part of that as well. And it's nice to see now that different managers are in. I mean, Steve Bruce is doing pretty well at Newcastle, but for a while he was looking like a little bit of a fossil. So, and I know a lot of Newcastle fans were upset when he was brought in. Obviously, they loved Benitez, and you understand why. But I think hopefully in the next few years we'll see some different managers, and the old will be flushed out, because otherwise it just gets boring, doesn't it? It's like, which teams are going to battle relegation again this season? And it seems to be those same ones that chop and change the same managers over and over again. But I think, in answer to the original question, Avram Grant's probably the worst manager I've ever seen, and I'm slightly biased, obviously being a West Ham fan, but he is a shocker, and yet still gets good jobs. I think he manages a national side now. He used to manage Ghana, but I think he manages. I've got a weird thing in my head that he's Iran manager now, but I'm not convinced by that as I say it. But still gets jobs, and you've got to question it, really. But it does bring up the wider question, doesn't it, around managers? What managers out there really are worth their weight in gold, and what ones are just not even worth the money at all? And I think that there are a lot. We'll then move on. I got a question submitted by a great account on Instagram. So shout out to Kitman's Bootbag on Instagram. It is at Kitman's Bootbag. If you want to find him in another way than typing that in, he'll get a shout out on my Instagram page, which is at Skippy Sensational Shirts, as I'm sure that you know, and I will put his Instagram handle in the description for this video as well. And he submitted the question about who's starting for you at right back for England, and I thought I'd broaden that out to my entire England 11. I answered the question, which you'll see in just a moment as I bring up the whole squad, and then I will talk through the players that I've put in and talk through why. And I'm just going to leave it on the screen for a moment, just for you to soak up before I talk it through. And I'm sure that this one will spark some debate. Absolutely, but I like that. Don't hesitate to get in touch to discuss what I'm saying would be my recommended England 11 for the further Nations League games and into Euro 21 and potentially the World Cup in 2022 as well, depending on who comes through. It's subject to performances, of course, but this would be my team. I'll take a swig of water and then I will talk it through. So starting in goal, I've gone Pickford for this one, although I watched the Everton-West Brom game today and he wasn't looking full of confidence. Distribution was poor. It wasn't a great start to him. I think, I'm already putting an asterisk by that one. Pickford or Pope. And watching the Manchester United game now, I think that, it depends what kind of season Henderson has for Manchester United. If he's second fiddle to De Gea, then he might not get a look in, unfortunately, for the Euros. But I do think it's between Pickford and Pope. I think that Pickford should keep more clean sheets than Pope because Everton should finish higher. They looked really good, but part of it is not necessarily about clean sheets. It's about making saves, and it's not always about where the team comes either. So just, if Everton comes sixth, then but concede way more goals to Burnley, then I will be hoping to see Nick Pope for England, not Pickford. But I still kind of romanticise Pickford, I think, based purely on that performance in the World Cup and the passion, and no one can ever take away from him the penalty shootout victory, of which he of course played a vital role, and obviously as did the crossbar against Colombia. But being fair to him, he was very good in the World Cup, and he's not been quite as good, but I think that he's still my England number one personally, but that is very dependent on this season's performance. Now moving on to the back line, and one thing that you'll notice straight away, and one thing that will spark debate, no doubt, is that I've gone with a back five. And the reason behind that is that in the World Cup and any England performance that I've seen, I feel more comfortable with the back five. You'll see from the central three that they're not great. They really aren't. Individually, they're very good, but not as a unit. I just don't think that they perform that well. So I think that the extra cover that a five can give you and the extra attacking options against teams that park the bus is why I would go for that. The three centre-backs, I would actually drop Kyle Walker back into that World Cup role of right-sided centre-back, just because I feel like you have to at this point. I feel like you have to have wider centre-backs on the left and right that have got pace and will be able to bail out Maguire when he needs it, because he is not the quickest. He can be a bit of a wardrobe on the turn as well, can't he? So yeah, I'd be dropping Walker in. I know that's a debatable one, and a lot of people will chuck in Gomez. That, as I'm looking at it now, I'm questioning whether or not it ends in a Z or an S. I've gone with an S. I've been ballsy, but I really don't know. A lot of people will chuck Gomez or Gomez in at right-sided centre-back, but I've gone Walker and I've gone Gomez on the left-hand side of that three with Maguire centrally. I think that centre-back is one of the positions where we do lack. Q Dyer, Q Declan Rice if he goes to Chelsea and plays centre-back. It'll be interesting to see how those seasons turn out, but this is what I'd go with right now. As of right now, this moment, I will be going with that. And of course, if we come up against Greece at any point, then Maguire can get windmilling and make sure that he gives their strikers a good seeing too, as he did on holiday. Wing-backs then, well, this one's up for debate. I think more right-back than left-back, although there's a couple of interesting wing-backs coming through. People like Maitland-Niles and Saka, who of course both play for Arsenal. I still think that Chilwell is my first choice left wing-back for England. I think that him and Sterling could have quite a good partnership down that left-hand side. Chilwell overlapping, of course, as Sterling cuts inside. And on the right, I've gone for TAA. I'm thinking about it now. I'm pondering, but I am going for TAA. Trippier is favoured by Southgate, and you can see why based on his performances at the World Cup, and he's still doing very well at Atletico. But no, I'd be going Trent Alexander-Arnold, and the reason why I'd be going for Trent Alexander-Arnold is purely his attacking play. He cannot defend. I stand by that statement. He cannot defend, but what he can give you from set pieces, and he'll have the link-up play with people like Henderson in midfield as well, and Gomez if he starts right-sided centre-back. They'll have that connection. He was very poor against Leeds, in my opinion. Obviously, he got away with it because he did technically header it into his own goal, but he was quite poor. I still think, at the moment, he starts for me at right wing-back. Trent Alexander-Arnold, and that should give him the freedom to push forward to his heart's content, because sometimes he can end up playing up front from right back, and in a back four that can leave you exposed. We'll go on to central midfield, and I know that this one will spark debate, and I know a few people will be looking at it thinking, why the hell have you got Winks in central midfield? But the reason behind that choice for me is because I think that he gives you something else. He's a very, very tidy player, He can pick up the ball and drive through the thirds. This is very much dependent. I've got no idea really on the England midfield. I think you've got to have Henderson in there. I think that's fairly obvious. But it's who plays alongside him. And if you go with this system, that's why I probably wouldn't go with Rice, because I think that that's just too defensive. I think that, I don't know if you heard me stifling a yawn then, by the way. I don't know why I'm yawning. I've literally done nothing all day. I'm boring myself, so apologies if I'm boring you. But yeah, no, I'd be going Winks purely just because I want someone that can drive through the thirds, and I think that he offers something defensively as well, which is why he gets in ahead of Mason Mount, but he also gets in ahead of Rice, because Rice isn't as good at driving forward, in my opinion. And then the front three, we got Sterling on the left, Sancho on the right, Kane through the middle. This is the front three that predominantly starts, and I would stick with that. Harry Kane's got a big season ahead of him, though. You've got Ings will potentially push on this season, and if he gets another 20 goals, I don't think he'll get another 20 goals, but if he gets another 15, then he'll be asking questions, because Kane and Tottenham haven't looked great, have they, under Mourinho? I think that they've been looking a bit boring, dare I say. So it'll be interesting to see how Kane does this season, and whether or not Rashford, although Rashford isn't playing a central role for Manchester United currently, whether or not he is pushing Kane out of that side. But I think that, Kane's the captain. I'd be stunned if he doesn't play for England when it comes to the Euros and the upcoming Nations League games. But I think that he's chasing records and stuff, of course, for England. I just hope that his not dry spell, but not particularly good spell at Tottenham isn't a reflection of how he's going to play for England. And I don't think it will be. But there you go, there is my recommended England 11, and that is for the Nations League, Euros, and potentially the World Cup. But of course, a lot of things can change in 2 seasons' time. I'd love to know what you guys think about this recommended England 11, so put some comments in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel either. All that's left from me is to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the shirt reviews. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, follow on Instagram, and have a great weekend. Or if you're watching it next week, then struggle through until the next weekend, until the next game week, the next FPL Selections podcast, and of course the next Skippy show will either be next weekend or at the start of next week. So I will keep you posted on that on the Instagram page. Thank you very much, and I will see you all soon.